If you remember a few videos back, we built and set up a gravel company for the layout. And now I've started looking at more open hopper cars to fill and move in and out of that gravel industry. You can find that video here. At my local hobby store and on eBay, I was able to find lots of 2-bay open hoppers, which would have been prototypical for the early 50s, but most are either empty or hauling coal. So I thought I would convert the loads to gravel by making a copy of the coal and painting the load to look like gravel. First things first, we need to see which cars have common inserts. These are microtrain cars, and they all share a common resin insert. Yes, I could just take the inserts that came with the cars and repaint those, but should I ever want or need to resell the cars, it would be better to have the original inserts. And like I said, not all the cars I can get my hands on actually come with a load. I found this little company called Let's Resin on Amazon, and they sell mold making kits and supplies. The nice thing is these plastic walls that they make. Makes a really nice finished mold. I just used a piece of wax paper for the bottom of the mold and double-sided tape to provide a leak-proof connection of the plastic walls to the waxed paper. I still put the whole bit on a plastic sheet just in case I had any spillage. And the kit also supplies some non-hardening clay. It's really greasy, but the silicone rubber won't stick to it. So you do have some cleanup of the oily residue on your master as well as the mold once it's finished, but you're guaranteed no stick. The plastic walls clip together with bulldog clips, again supplied in the kit. After pushing the master into the clay and pushing it into the cavity of the mold, the silicone rubber is mixed 1-to-1 by weight. You can stir this mixture quite vigorously, as the rubber has a very long cure time, which means the bubbles will kind of degas on their own. Once combined, pour the rubber into the mold and walk away. Working time is 1 to 2 hours, and you can demold in 6. For a simple one-sided mold like this, you just need to tear down the mold walls, remove the wax paper, it usually comes off with the plastic, and then just carefully flex the mold to release the master. To make a copied part, I use a 2-part epoxy resin. It's a 1-to-1 ratio by volume, not by weight. No scales needed. I also dropped in a bit of blue India ink just for some contrast. Now, with the epoxy, you want to stir slowly and evenly, and you only have 10-20 minutes to work. This means that air bubbles may not have enough time to rise to the surface and degas like the silicone. So I like to let the mixing container just sit for a few minutes after mixing, let the bubbles percolate to the surface, and then I hit the top with a small torch. This will burst any bubbles near the surface. Then it's just a very slow pour into the mold, again, to reduce the number of air bubbles and letting the resin find its own level. I come back in several times over the next 10 to 15 minutes with that torch to burst any bubbles that rise to the surface. With this particular part, we've molded it upside down, and the back side you'll never see. So the bubbles should be moving away from the details, so it's not as super critical. After another overnight cure time, the finished part can be demolded and any flash cleaned up. A quick test fit shows that the mold has made good parts. Now comes the fun part. I used a light gray primer on the top surfaces and a black primer on the bottom. The black primer was to reduce any translucency from the epoxy, and the top gray would give us a good starting point for the final color. And airbrushed the load a very light mix of white gray paint from Vallejo. I think they call it sky gray. And I mixed it in with a little bit of off-white pale sand, again from Vallejo. You could also hand paint these parts. Just make sure to thin your paints well so as not to obscure any of the fine detail. After that dried, I gave the whole thing a light coat of gloss varnish in preparation for an oil wash. I picked a very light brown color for my wash, thinned it way down with thinner, and just painted it over the whole thing. Gave it another 15-20 minutes to sit and dry, and then came back with a cotton swab and a brush, dampened with thinner, and removed all but the deepest recesses. Again, I gave us an overnight time for the oil to kind of set up a little bit and dry off, and then I came back with a quick little dry brush, again of that pale sand and sky gray, just to kind of bring the highlights back up. After all that had dried, and it dries pretty quickly because it's just a dry brush, I came back in and top coated everything with a matte varnish. This was twofold. One, to add another layer of protection to the paint with the possibility of a lot of handling on the railroad, and it knocked the shine down from the oil paint. And here's a final reveal of the hopper full of gravel. I hope you enjoyed the video as much as I did making it. And remember, hobby is supposed to be fun.